maybe let's start with some of your questions and see if we can shape or direct some of the ideas that I'm going to speak about to at least to connect to some of the questions that you might have. The invitation, as Rabbi Sachs puts it, like British people never like to ask the first question, so we'll just skip to the second one. Sam, go on, yeah.
I'm not sure kind of what realm of discussion you want to enter, Rabbi.
But I think we'll talk about Pesach, broadly speaking.
No, I'll stick with Pesach. The question I still haven't really fully understood is the real ideas about how chametz symbolizes, the Yetzer Hara and evil things, and yet and levels of gaiva, and yet I'm still trying to have the full understanding of why it's permitted all year round if it represents these forms of gaiva. But there's an issue on it on Pesach. I feel it must have something to do with the very nature and spiritual elements of those 7-8 days themselves, but still, I'm still struggling.
Excellent, good start. Great. So sugya, broadly speaking, I mean, there's Bichlal, you will see that it's very, I mean, there's a thematic issue over here throughout Pesach, which is that we behave differently to the rest of the year, right? It's actually all the way through Maseches Pesachim. And in fact, every time Pesach appears anywhere else in Shas, there is an assumption in Pesach we are different types of Jews with Zerizim. So you see it at the end of the first parak of Shabbos, that certain precautions you ordinarily would need to take. We don't worry about Kohanim in the Beis HaMikdash and Jews when it comes to Pesach. That's the last mission in the first parak of Shabbos. We see it all over. We see it even as a play on words in Gittin. I think it's in the 8th parak. It's in the sugya there of the person who says, I'm shechting whoever gets into Yerushalayim first, the Breira sugya. And you see it throughout Maseches Pesachim. There's so many sugyas where we are assumed to be Zerizim, right? In Daf Daled, right near the beginning, when we ask, why do you do B'dikas Chametz at night? And we say, even if you want to say Zerizim Makdim in the mitzvahs, so we still should only be in the day. So where on earth do we ever find the concept Zerizim Makdim and creates a chiyuv? On Pesach it could. Have them in the Gemara. I see it all over Daf Yud Beis, all over sugyas. So you're right. You're asking a very, very fine question, which is we're meant to live elevated on Pesach, but hey, then we talk about chametz as the Yetzer Hara. The Pesach is much more than elevating Yetzer Hara, and as you say, why would you be able to have it all year round, except in the Beis HaMikdash? The klal in halacha, by the way, is the way you behave in the Beis HaMikdash all year round is the way you behave as a Jew on Pesach, right? Because in the Beis HaMikdash and in Mincha, you also have chametz. Okay, good question. So we'll look into that one. What other questions do we have? I did drop some nice things in there, by the way, for you to think about, apart from, go on. That's for those of you who have just been doing Daf Yomi and following Maseches Pesachim. Hopefully that will have shed light in about 6 or 7 sugyas there. Okay, what else? What other things do we, what other questions do we have, points that we're interested in, would love to hear discussed?
An interesting question, Rabbi, in terms of, is the Makkas, what exactly is their purpose? Because on the one hand, obviously part of the purpose is to release the Jewish people. On the other hand, it seems to be that there's also like an educational role in the Makkas for the Egyptians, which is all very nice, but then they all get killed and drown. And even the Kriyas Yam Suf, there's Makuris where somehow it's teaching the Mitzrayim something as they're drowning in the sea. So just exactly what is the point of the Makkas? Why all 10? Is it to teach the Egyptians, to teach the world? Or what exactly is going on?
Excellent question. Okay, good. Do we have any other questions we want to go through? Nothing has yet aroused your curiosity. We've got the halacha of an Ein Yodea Lishal at the moment. Now, joking, don't worry. I'm sure you've got loads of curious things. But it is a very interesting ha'ara. Who is an Ein Yodea Lishal exactly? Generally, it's not going to be children. Like in the little Haggadah books, we have children painted as Ein Yodea Lishals. I've never yet met a child as an Ein Yodea Lishal. Ein Yodea Lishal is usually adults. Right? They can even be rabbis, like people who come to educate other people, but are not being shoyal themselves, not seeking. That's a nick called an Ein Yodea Lishal. Anyway, let's get to work on some of these concepts over here. Right? Let's start with you, Sam, and then in fact let's talk Bechlal. Let's talk about it. I mean, in fact, let me be not like a Chacham. Chacham is Oinal Rishon, Achron. So let's go in the reverse order. Since Seder night is always about an inversion of order, or as the Sfas Emes puts it, it's another Seder. There's a normal, natural order of things. We have a different order of things. Start with Danny's question. The purpose of the Makkos. So the truth is there's more than one purpose to the Makkos, as we know. right? In the Torah itself, right? I'm thickening out. Yeah, this I presume is the base of your question, Danny. Is that in the Makkos themselves, in the Torah itself, it gives three reasons, right? The Makkos Dam is prefaced with L'man Yedin in order that you'll know Ki Ani Hashem. That there's a concept called Hashem, right? There's a creator of the universe called Hashem. The second three, right, the Adash ones are prefaced with the ones that take place at the level of the human body. The first three take place lower down. The next three at the level of the human, and they are prefaced with the Man Yed in order that you'll know, Manted in order that you'll know, Ki Hashem b'karef ha'aretz. I am God in the midst of nature, in distinguishing Yisrael from the Mitzrayim and those Makkos that are at the level of the human being. There's Midrash Chazal, they were all distinguished, but they're the emphasis. This is the purpose. This is, Makkos that are basically happening to the human or at the level of the human, right? Animal and human will be distinguished Yisrael from the Amim, which means it's not just a blanket. There's God running the Hashgacha Protis as well as Klalis, or at least Umis, national Hashgachas and the subgroup Hashgachas. So that's the second wave. And the third wave, which go higher than the human, the third wave that go upwards, they are all prefaced, so you should know, Ki ein kamoni b'chol haaretz. There's nothing like me in all the land. Which, just by the way, whenever you learn, you've got to learn from every angle. One thing we do have to also think of is the context that things would have meant to people at the time. We have a slight area of new idea that has emerged in the last 150, 200 years. We've got a bit of Egyptology. It can help us understand some of these things, because we now have a bit of a better sense of how the Egyptians viewed their gods. And we know that in the New Kingdom, around this period, wherever you date exactly Yetzias Mitzrayim, it'll be there. And we know that the highest of the gods was called Ra, which is why Paro keeps saying Ruki Ra Neged Penechem. Probably it's a play on the Lashon HaKodesh from the Egyptian. He probably said the word Ra, meaning the sun god. And this goes all the way through, right? When Moshe says Ki Bara Hitziasam, etc., that after the Egel. So, but Ra, of course, by the Hashgach of the Lashonos, is going to mean evil. In the highest Avodah Zarah is going to be the close to the root of evil. But when they did Makas Choshech, the higher these things go and the more they govern, the more Hashem is destroying the order that comes from above to below, the more it would have showed the Mitzrayim that whatever they believed in was not in control. And when finally the sun itself is blackened, is darkened, and there's Makas Choshech, that would have decimated the concept of Ra, of the sun god. And for those who know further, if you ever go to the British Museum, you'll see that there's actually a statue of this, but there was a concept that there was a Ra had different forms, and the highest, the one that protected the pharaoh is called Chanum Ra, and it was in the form of the sheep or the ram. So when that was being shechted, these things were massive that was going on. Anyway, how did I get there? Because, so on the one hand, we're teaching the Mitzrayim. Now, you're right, a lot of Mitzrayim die, but obviously the whole of Mitzrayim doesn't die. Now, there's a bigger question on the Medrash at the Kriyas Yamsuf, and is the Medrash arguing with the idea that everyone at Kriyas Yamsuf died? Is it, but it be a Yesod HaDavar, I would say like this: any survivor in Mitzrayim would have heard about it. How would they hear about it? It's a good question, right? In the Pshutei Shel Mikra, individuals may have survived and gone back. It depends on which Midrashim you follow. Did everyone die? It might be there's a Machlokes Midrashim, but certainly the Makkos themselves, the vast majority of Mitzrayim did survive, right? Bechorim died, but everybody else didn't die. So the lesson would have been there. Now, what would happen to that lesson is a good question. Right? What would happen forever after with Mitzrayim is a very deep question. Generally speaking, the Torah itself is meant to be some kind of hurrah for the world as well. But these lessons can take centuries or millennia till they permeate civilization. So, so the fact that Hashem's teaching a lesson from them doesn't mean necessarily that they're going to be fully absorbed, fully integrated, 100% there and then. They may lay seeds and foundations or doubt about the success of paganism or whatever it may be, that ultimately in the long run, the world will eventually learn these lessons and absorb them. But whatever those lessons are to Mitzrayim, on Seder night, we don't focus on them. We also don't focus on a lot of lessons of the Makkos, because we don't focus on the justice side. We don't focus on the Hashem is more powerful than evil side. We don't focus on the fact that evil gets destroyed side. The reason that we know that is because the Makkos come into the Haggadah as a second drasha on the last pasuk of Arami Ovedavi, of the 4 pasukim that we bring, right? When we know as we go through the Haggadah and we're meant to be Dorish on Arami Ovedavi, That is the Maschil Begunusum Masayim B'Shvach. We start from the low point and go to the high point. And the Machlokes in the Gemara is that Avodim Hayinu, is it Arami Ovidavi? The two sets of psukim that speak in reasonable length about Yetzias Mitzrayim, Avodim Hayinu and Parashat Vayischanan, which we only take some of them, and then Arami Ovidavi, the farmers Bikurim, the first fruit declaration. That is where the four psukim that we're doirish come from. And the fourth pasuk says, Hashem takes out B'yod Chazaka with a strong hand, B'Zroin Atuya with an outstretched arm, B'Moira Godel with great awesomeness, but Oisos with signs of Amosim with wonders. And the Haggadah says, what do these things refer to? So Yod Chazaka is Dever, right? The strong hand is the plague of Dever. Why should the strong hand be the plague of Dever? Because we use the pasuk of Yad Hashem was Haya B'Mikna, right? It's the pasuk that says, it uses the idea of a hand of Hashem when it's giving Dever in other contexts. So, of course, the real remez also is Dever is the fifth makkah, and therefore it's like a hand. 5, because makkahs can be called Etzba Elokim, finger of God. So the fifth one. Then that's the Yod Chazaka, the strong hand. Then there's Zroin Atuya, the outstretched arm, with Doirish and Makkahs B'Choros, the Cherev. Okay, Moira Godel, right? So we say this is the Gilui Shechina, this is the revelation of Shechina. We bring Pesukim. But Isis, that's the stick, that's the matter. And Mofsim is the blood at the beginning of the Makkahs process. So we have various remozim to various makkahs. Dova Acher says the Haggadah, right? This is the only drosha of the Arami Ovidavi droshas that Haggadah gives another one of the whole pasuk. What do we say? Yod Chazak. But it's a great question to ask anybody at the Seder night, except that by then often people are rushing because they've spent so long discussing Manish Tanan, Avodim Hayinu, and rabbis in Bnei Barak, the bits you're not mechuyev to discuss, and there's no particular harazim meshubach on discussing them. But I shouldn't be too. But you got to be careful. Sometimes I say this to Heilige Yeshiva, and they go back and then or students learning, you go back and tell the parents off. The meshubach is that it keeps children engaged and involved, and that's nice. But in terms of the ikka, what we're meant to be doiresh, that's Arami Ovidavi. Maybe from the words mitchila Ovidavi Zahariya Basena, which is really an introduction. All the way, that's really what we're meant to be. Marabel Idrosh, ideally. You got lots of kids in the house, but if you do have a time to be doirish on that, that's where you're really meant to go into it in real depth and real work. By the way, a very lovely thing to do, if your parents are happy to do it, is just take the 4 psukim out and look at them together and analyze them, make sure you cover all the midrashim. Anyway, however you want to do it. But the point is that 4th pasuk then gets in Dovo Acher, another pshat. Something was missing in the first one. So the great question you could ask everyone is, how do we get to the 10 makkos, right? And most people won't even realize it was a second drosha on the 4th pasuk of Arami Ovidavi, because now God says Yod Chazaka Shtaim, right? A strong hand is 2. Zroin Atuya Shtaim, outstretched arm is 2. Moira Gadol Shtaim, great awesomeness 2. Isis Steins, signs 2, Mosim Steins, wonders, 2. These are the 10 plagues that Hashem brought in. These are they. What is going on? The answer is, it's saying every single term refers to 2 aspects of God's revelation, right? Yod Chazaka, so hand of God would be one aspect. Adding an adjective, Chazaka, is the second aspect of revelation. Arm, outstretched arm, etc., etc. Moira Godel, right? Awesomeness, great awesomeness. There's 6 so far. Oisos is plural, signs, Mosim is plural, wonders. That's 10. And you wonder if the Haggadah wanted to, it wants to get us 10 makkos. Well, there's not enough psukim in the Torah that talk about the makkos, so we've got to squeeze one out of Arami Ovidavi. That's like, and if Arami Ovidavi wanted to tell us about makkos, why couldn't it say it's in Hashem Mitzrayim, but Esem makkos? Why is the pasuk in Arami Ovidavi put it in such an obscure way that, right? And the teretz must be the ein mikriyetzim de pshutai, klal godel in all of drashas, is the pshat of the pasuk remains the critical veneer, and not just veneer, but the mapping of the topography of whatever's going to be nidrash. That is a bit of a machlokes, since the Malbim always holds drashas or be'etz and pshat read correctly, and the Goyin and others hold no, it isn't. But the zelachud v'zelachud, they're different, but there's still a linkage between the drasha and the over meaning of the pasuk. And so the over meaning of the pasuk tells you that, see, had it just said Hashem took us out with 10 makkos, you might learn all the lessons of the makkos. The non-Jews should learn about Hashem. You might learn it's about justice. You might learn it's about evil being destroyed. There's a lot of lessons you could learn, all of which are true. But the one that Arami Ovidavi focuses on is there was revelation of God. In Mitzrayim, everything was stripped from us except for the koach to connect to Hashem. We lost our natural right to exist because no people ever emerged, no slave people ever emerged from Egypt as an independent people. It would not have happened. The geopolitical forces that govern the world, the way things work naturally, psychologically, and sociologically, the best hope would have been one day we would have become free Egyptians. That's it. We were gone. Spiritually, we're in the Mem Tashari Tumah. We don't deserve, even a week later, the Malachim can't spiritually distinguish us from the Mitzrayim, nothing. So we don't spiritually deserve to exist. No Malach could have saved us. So Nivelo Malach. The only thing that happens is the ancestral gene. And this is the beauty of Mitchila that in the beginning our ancestors were pagans. I'm putting together the Maharal, various chapters in the Gevuras Hashem, here with what the Ramchal says and Derech Hashem, and actually what also you put it together, you'll see many others say this. They pick up piece of this in the Sfas Emes, a piece of this in Ritzchak Isaac Choven, but the big chapters in the Maharal there and the Ramchal really put this, Ramchal not big chapters, a few pieces, but it clearly works like this. That Hashem told Avraham Avinu, I'm going to put you into Mitzrayim and take you out the other side. And you think, why did he do that? And the answer is because Mitzrayim stripped everything from us, right? It stripped everything from us except like a seed planted in the ground. And we use that drasha, right? The drasha on the first pasuk of Verav, at the end of the first pasuk of Rami Evedavi. We're planted like a plant, and the seed is buried. It looks like it's dead. And if you're watching underground, it would decompose. It would look even worse. And then a shoot starts growing. And when all hope of existence ended, when there was nothing we could rely on for our existence at all, when we should not have been able to exist, what awoke within us was the ancestral gene that had passed through Avraham, who himself, only one of his children follows him. Through Yitzchak, only one follows. Through Yaakov, where they all follow, even if there's problems. And that becomes Yisrael, and that is planted in Mitzrayim. And in Mitzrayim, we lose every other right to existence until that spiritual gene comes alive. Vanitzak el Hashem Elokei Avosenu, the third pasuk of Rami Evedavi. We cried out to Hashem Elokei Avosenu. We said, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, we don't want the natural world. We don't even want the supernatural algorithms and malachim and all these things. We want you. And we are willing to dedicate our entire existence to you. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu comes in and says, I'm coming in. Ani v'lo malach, ani v'lo saraf, right? It's going to be me. There was a malach. Okay, he's telling him, go here, but the malach couldn't independently have saved us. But HaKadosh Baruch Hu himself. And that means that the creation of Klal Yisrael, the way more or less the Maharal puts it, is it's not like we come out like every other nation, plus we have a Torah. It's the Yisrael cannot function like every other nation. We simply cannot exist in a world like every other nation. And so we exist solely based on our at least on a national level in the medium to long term, on our Dveikus B'Hashem. That's it. That's what's created in the world. That's consequence number one. And the Makos, therefore, are going to be brought up in the context of Hashem's revelation that came into Mitzrayim that night. Ani v'lo malach, ani v'lo saraf, anihu. This is what it is. And if you know the very famous, I'm sure by now you all know it, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, we used to say it was a big chiddush to people. Today, Baruch Hashem, the world knows these Torahs more. But at the Sfas Emes, in fact, there's a teaching the Maharal already reveals to us that the 10 Makos have a parallel to the 10 sayings of creation. In the Maharal's Cheshbon, they're not an exact linear parallel. In the Cheshbon of the Sfas Emes, in the Cheshbon of Ritzchak Isaac Chover, they are. They don't fully develop it. I'm not trying to plug my Haggadah. I got a little commentary on Haggadah. Some of the shops have it, whatever. But I did a Cheshbon. I tried to work out, I think, how it can work through all 10. But there's certainly, you see, the basic structure, the decreation of the world. The 10 Makos peel away. If you imagine the creation is the 10 concentric circles from the word Bereshis, assuming the Midrash and Bereshis, Nami Mama, Yihi Ar, all the way through. And then the Makos destroy them in inverse order. So that by the end, you see that there's no laws and no limits that are going to hold us back, that are going to intercede. Yisrael is not born under the Asar Mamoros, under the 10 sayings of creation. We're born in a world where they have no power. And that means that we're not born ever going to accept the natural order of things. Yisrael's most fundamental tafkid in the world is to reject the fact that the way power is defines what's right. And Yisrael introduced, even in a relatively natural historical sense, you can see that Yisrael transformed the world this way. Lots of historians have noticed it. Lots of religions sprung up inspired by what we're doing. Lots of ideologies did in history. But it's this sense that we don't need to be limited by the power structures of the way things are now. And what happens, therefore, on Seder night, what happens is that we are lifted, like we were there, to whatever level we want to be. The Yehi Or has been undone with Makas Choshech. The Bereshis has been undone with Makas B'chayros. And everything's now been ripped away. And here we are, where there's no limit to how high we can climb on Leil HaSeder. There's complete chayrus. It's us and HaKadosh Baruch Hu. B'chavodo Yiva'atzmai. Who penetrates, enters the world. And you know what the only limit is? Us. Which is why it's so important to be shoyal, to be seeking. Why we begin Seder, Lefidato shel ben aviv melamdo, according to the knowledge of the child, the awareness of the child, the father teaches them, says the Kedushas Levi. The ultimate child created in Mitzrayim was B'ni B'chayri Yisrael. Yisrael is the children of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And Lefidato shel ben aviv melamdo, HaKadosh Baruch Hu is waiting. It's up to us to be seeking. That's why it's so important to be the Chacham or the Tam, not the Rosh and Einei Dei Lishol. We have to find all of these within us and get rid of the Einei Dei Lishol. Get rid of. I'm not going to explain it now, but if you look carefully, you'll see the Rosh is also treated as an Einei Dei Lishol, gets the same answer as the Einei Dei Lishol in the early parts of the Haggadah. We've got to rip that away. We've got to be shoyal. Okay, so we're on this level, and the next thing we find. Any questions so far, by the way, before we go further and get back towards what Sam was asking? I take that as a no. Okay. Feel free to interject and ask questions, or you can leave them in the chat or whatever. But the madrega we're on Leil HaSeder is the madrega that is outside the natural. It's beyond space and time. It's, there's a Yitzchak Isaac Chava says that, ask the kasha, that we say that Moshe Rabbeinu says, Kachatzos halayla, right, in Parashas Bo, around midnight I'm going to come into Mitzrayim. And the Gemara in Brachos, and Rashi brings it there, is he says it because he was afraid that even though it's by Yibachatzi Alayla, it's actually at midnight. And why did Moshe Rabbeinu change it to Kachatzos halayla? Because he was afraid that it's like Ninim Shel Paroi, the astrologers of Paroi, they're going to get it wrong and say Moshe Badoi. Now, it sounds very funny. It sounds nice until you think about it a little bit and realize, number one, really? What? Let's suppose they miscalculated it by a minute or two. And then a minute later, boom, all the Bukharim, they're going to really turn around and go, Moshe Badai. But the other, of course, logistical problem is, how do they tell time at night? In the day, they use sundials. There weren't very accurate systems for timing. So it's kasha. And that would have been true, by the way, in Rashi's day as well. It would have been quite difficult. So, and certainly the Gemara's day. So this was not like something that which they anachronistically missed. The teretz, I think, is, so Yitzchak Chava says, Gavaldiga thing, because it's incoherent. You cannot come out by Chatzi Alayla. It's not possible. Chatzi Alayla means the midpoint, the splitting point of the night. If you took the night as a line and you tore it in two, everything that's before the midpoint is Chatzi, is up till is that, and everything that's after, everything's either before or after. There is no moment at Chatzi Alayla. There's no such thing as coming out ba Chatzi Alayla. That's not possible. You come out Kachatzos halayla, around it a few seconds, few minutes. That's Moshe Rabbeinu Badai. Moshe talks nonsense. He says, that's what they would have said, that you're coming out in a moment. They can't be mechaven what this means. And they would have said, Moshe talks gobbledygook. We're coming out in the splitting of the night. Did you say in the splitting of that? Doesn't make any sense. And therefore they wouldn't have listened to him. Kachatzos, around the midpoint of the night, will come out. But Yisrael comes out b'chatzi halayla in a moment that doesn't exist in time. This is not just a Yitzchak Isaac Chava, it's actually a Targum Yonason, which Al Torah is probably not Rabbi Yonason ben Uziel, but it doesn't matter what it is. It's an ancient Targum. The Targum says that it's on Parashas Yisro, where Kodesh Baruch Hu says to Klal Yisrael, he tells Moshe to say, you saw that I took you up to Mitzrayim, v'eseschem al kamfei neshayim v'avi eschem elai. I carried you on wings of eagles and brought you to me. What wings of eagles? When was there ever kamfei neshayim, Parashas Bo? Or B'shalach. So what's the teretz? Says the Targum Yonason, what it means is, I took you on kamfei neshayim, v'avi eschem, I brought you to me to the Beis HaMikdash to eat the Korban Pesach. Unbelievable. That's what it means. Obviously, I brought you to me. I carried you on wings of eagles to Yerushalayim. You sat in the Beis HaMikdash. There's no Beis HaMikdash there. What do you mean? There wasn't even created the world yet. So anyway, what are we talking about? The teretz is, I lift you out of space and time, and you go to the future. where we're sitting in Yerushalayim, maybe Yemai Mashiach, maybe Bayis Rishon, who knows, where you're sitting there with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the end of history. That's what, in other words, we were lifted out of the natural order of things, and Yisrael is created beyond space and time. Yisrael is created so that we are not citizens ever of the present. We were born in the future. We were born such that our identity is Rotzoin Hashem, the vision God has for the world, the future. Klal Yisrael is a people who never can live as full citizens of the present, because we are citizens of Olam Haba, citizens of the world as it will be when it is perfected. Citizens of Lahavi D'Maisa Mashiach L'Chai Olam Haba. That's who we are. That's what we are. That's what was created in Mitzrayim. Now we've got to lose that Madrega, and then we've got to climb our way up there. We've got to bring in a Torah that's going to be the constitution of Olam Haba. That's what we've got to do. And to live timelessly, we had to be in a mitzvah of Lo Yochel Ismamea. You couldn't delay. Chatzos comes, you got to go. The late, perhaps the second Yitzhak in the morning, it's the same process. And the food that we're going to have is Gam Tzeder Yosalem. There's not going to have any preparation. We're going to go b'chipazon. We're going to go in, even if we knew about it 2 weeks before, we're not going to get the time, because every moment of Chayros has to be a moment without time. And the food that we're going to eat, the matzah we're going to eat, is food that has no time. Food that is not allowed to rise into space and time. The key difference in chametz and matzah is that chametz and matzah have identical ingredients. They have to in halacha, right? You can't be matzah if it couldn't be chametz. But it's got to be food where the only difference in ingredient is, does it move into space and time? And so, Sam, going back to your question, chametz, we do talk about it, the sa'aras sheba issa, the Eitzara. It's an expression and gaiva, but these are subtleties within it. Its most natural expression is nature, right? The inflated world of space and time, the natural, the physical, all this various stuff, which carries with it, the more we attach ourselves to it, it carries with it gaiva and Yetzara. But in the Beis HaMikdash, we're always timeless and spaceless, and therefore we always only have matzah. In Leil HaSeder, for 8 days, we also live beyond space and time, and therefore we also are fed by food that doesn't move in the world of space and time. We have the food of matzah. In Mitzrayim itself, they had matzah on Leil HaSeder. They didn't know why, right? That's of matzah. And then we lose that madrega. We're lifted to a madrega we don't belong on. But it's a madrega should always inspire us. Then we put on the ground, and we have 49 days to painstakingly work our way back up. And the difference is that on Pesach, HaKadosh Baruch Hu lifts us out. The 10 Makos come, the world of matzah, the world of elevation, the world beyond, madrega we don't deserve, and it's an awakening from above. And then we come down to earth inspired and start climbing back. Comes Shavuos, and this time, instead of us going up to Shamayim, Shamayim comes down to earth. HaKadosh Baruch Hu brings the Torah down to earth. Hopefully we become kalim to absorb it. And there is the mincha of chametz of the year. Right, the Shtei Alechem comes on Shavuos, because there we can now bring the Kedusha even into the world of chametz. Okay, so these are some of the Yesodus of Yetzias Mitzrayim. I think we've hopefully answered both the questions we started with. But HaKadosh Baruch Hu should really allow us, and our Hachana should do this, that when we get to that moment, that we're ready for Makas B'Cheres again. Anyone who's called Lo Yada'ucha, anyone who attacked you, God, who fought against you, God, who pushed you out of the world, God, who destroyed your soul, anyone like that, we're ready for all evil to be removed. We're ready to jump. We're ready to jump back to you, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. When we hit Chatzos with matzah, that our body will be sustained for the next 8 days on matzah, on the elevated Nahama, Memnusa, the bread of Emunah, of connection to your HaKadosh Baruch Hu, that we should all be zeicha to touch that. It's a beautiful thing. You prepare Seder beautifully, prepare Pesach correctly. On Seder night, we should behave as Kodesh as we always dream of being. That the Hasidim, there's a beautiful Piskami Araisa where he says, there's 2 Rosh Hashanahs in the year. The Rosh Hashanah, Tosa says this in Rosh Hashanah. The Rosh Hashanah of Tishri is B'tchilad of Machshavah, it arose in God's mind to create the world this way. But he actually created it in Nisan. Says the Piskami Araisa, is based on that Rizal, that I believe, that in Rosh Hashanah we recreate an Aliyah B'Machshava, a vision. All the plans we had for Motzei Yom Kippur, we should have been working on through the winter, slowly, small steps moving there. Pesach, we're going to start giving birth to that plan. Be'ez Hashem, we should be zeichet have real chayrus and be able to connect all the way to Kodesh Baruch Hu. We should be nitzig Hashem Elokei Avosenu, and just like Benissim Nigalo Avosenu Benissim Hasidim Ligal, we should be zeicha. That's really through the Aliyah and Achana for Pesach, Aliyah of Pesach itself. We should be zeicha to sit with Yisrael in the with the Kodesh Baruch Hu in the Beis Hamikdash. If we're zeicha physically, and if we're not zeicha physically, to be zeicha in our minds and on our shamas as we travel there on Leila Seder, and through that be zeicha to see it b'meir v'yameinu. I believe I aim to finish on time, so I think I went a minute over, but I'm happy to stick around if people want to ask questions, unless there's another part of the program where I just